Alright, so this is boxMan video tutorial number 10 and part 6 of the rigging section. Alright, so this is one of the most important parts of rigging because it could possibly be the most complicated part. So it's really important to pay attention to this part and know what each constraint does. Because there's different types of constraints and there's different settings on the constraints, and it can be a lot of trouble if you don't set it up quite right. So a couple of things have changed since the last video. I adjusted the CVs on here so that I got kind of like an eye shape. You can see it's barely moving around when I scale up, scale down the inner vertices, but this is basically a circle, and I just tweaked it so that I get more of an eye shape. I've also skillfully crafted these text curves. Okay, maybe not, but actually Maya has a built-in text feature, so it's very easy. You just go to Create, Text, Option Box, and you specify what letter you want, and you want it in curves. When you do this, like let's just say in, you're going to get a curve on the bottom. Mine is facing, mine is laying down because I'm in Z-up coordinate system. But you also notice that you get this, you get it in kind of like two groups here. So first thing I did was unparent it, and I deleted history on it, because if you try and delete other stuff, especially if you do a letter but in a polygon instead of just a curve, if you don't delete history, when you delete the curve, it'll delete the mesh. So make sure to unparent this first, and then you can edit the curve. Then you can delete the groups after. Just make sure that your curve is actually unparented. Secondly, I named it. And third, I used a very important other feature that is close to freeze transformation. It's called center pivot. So right now my pivot point is at the bottom left of the end, and if I do modify center pivot, changes it to the center, so I can rotate all around, and now I can snap to the center. Well, I can snap the center of the end to basically wherever I want to. So these these texts are basically for pole vectors. A lot of people use locators, which are right here at the bottom under Create. The reason why I don't use a locator is because it's basically just a cross, and let's say I'm doing that example where the guy's scared and his knees are shaking, right? So you would do something like this with both of them. If you do that, you might get your locators confused between right and left, and even though it would take you a second to figure it out, I just like this because I know exactly where the pole vector is and what it relates to. So it's important where you set up your pole vectors. Make sure that they're directly in front of the knees. So first snap both of them to the knees, and then move them out to the same distance in front of the knees. You basically kind of want about this distance. You don't want it really close or really far. Just kind of like the scale of your model, of course, will vary compared to this model, but kind of just approximate. The other thing about the elbow pole vectors is they go right behind the shoulders. I know it's like strange, but they actually go behind the shoulders. They don't go behind the elbows. Then there's all these other things called like knee locks, elbow locks, using set-driven key. By the way, look into set-driven key. Excellent way to just to obtain more control. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of constraints. Or let me just go over the constraints first. Oh, by the way, I named the pole vectors right here and put them in the control curves group. Alright, so you have this constrain menu right here. I'm going to break it off. If you do these two double lines, you can break stuff off like that. So we have a point constraint, which is a translation constraint, meaning wherever you move one object, let's say if I have a sphere right here, and I have a cube right here, then I want the sphere to control the cube in a point constraint. So I click that, oops. This is another thing. You want to make sure you select the option box, because you have to check this box right here called maintain offset, or else, like you just saw, the cube the second object, the slave object, will snap to the center of the master object. So if you do maintain offset, click add right here. If I move the sphere around, it moves the cube around. I can still move the cube around. and whenever I move the sphere around again, it snaps it back. So that's very important to know. Parenting is different in the sense that if I have like two objects like this, a sphere and a cube, and I parent the cube to the sphere, child, then parent, then hit P on the keyboard, I can move the sphere around, but see, it seems like it's the same object. But you can move the cube independently and then move the sphere again, and it won't snap back like in Constraint. There are ways to do that with constraining. I personally like constraining better because you can turn it on and off, and you can make up separate controls for that. Parenting you cannot turn on and off. So that said, point constraint is translation. Aim constraint, we're going to use that for the head. One object always aims at another object. Orient is rotation constraint. Scale, obviously, is scale. Parent is a combination of point and orient. But basically, if you have two objects like this, the sphere and the cube again, and you do, the sphere will control the cube, and you do parent. See how it takes, these turn blue over here, so it's got incoming, it's got inputs. I can rotate, and see this cube will rotate in accordance to the center of the sphere. So that's the parent constraint. But if you do a point constraint and an orient constraint right here, so I'm going to do sphere, then cube, master, then slave, point, and then orient. Notice that when I do orient, it doesn't rotate around the center of the sphere, but it does move with it. So it acts the same, except the rotation, the pivot point of the rotation is different. So that's important to know. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and do half the body again, and I'm just going to start off with the feet. So we're going to do a point constraint. First of all, we're going to make the pivot point of our ankles. We're going to make it the actual ankle. The way that we do that is you hold D on your keyboard, changes the pivot point, and hold V, and we're going to middle mouse drag and snap to the ankle. Same thing right here. And so I'm going to select the curve, shift select the IK, so master then slave, go into our point options, make sure maintain offset is on, we want to constrain all axes, hit apply, and now when I move this control around, I can, the IK moves with it. And I can just say, oh, I want the character to go back in the rig position, and so I can just hit 0, 0, 0 on this left foot control, it'll snap right back there. That's the whole point of freezing transformation, so you can get back to your original binding pose. Alright, but what if we want to do a toe point? Well, you want to select the control curve and then the joint, and then do a orient constraint, but make sure you have the option box. So make sure you also do maintain offset. Go ahead and hit apply. So now I can move the ankle around and also rotate the foot. And again, all I have to do is type in 0, 0, 0 and it snaps back. And the hand will be done pretty much the exact same way. I'm going to actually, I'm sure you guys can figure out the hand because it is literally the exact same thing. Grab the control, grab the IK, point constraint, grab the control, grab the wrist joint, and orient constraint. I'm just going to do the pole vector constraint, and I'm going to show you what you're going to do with the pole vector constraint. Basically, you're going to select the pole vector constraint, shift select the IK, and do pole vector constraint. But you also see how it always points to it, like that. You also want to group this independently, so by itself, and then make that group pivot point the ankle, and then point constrain the group to the joint. So you're going to select the joint, control select that group after you name it, and do a parent constraint. So that now it rotates around. This video's up, so I'll time's up, so I'll finish this in the next video.